The metallic taste of blood lingered on my tongue as I swiped concealer over the purple bloom beneath my left eye. My bathroom mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized anymore. Pale, hollowed out, moving with the mechanical precision of someone who'd learned to exist in survival mode. The fluorescent light overhead flickered, casting shadows that made the bruises look worse, deeper, like ink bleeding through paper. I had exactly 43 minutes before I needed to be at Dante Rinaldi's office downtown. 43 minutes to transform myself from Ryan's punching bag into the efficient, unshakable assistant that Chicago's most dangerous man relied on. My fingers trembled as I applied foundation in careful layers, building coverage like armor, each stroke a small lie I told the world. The apartment around me felt smaller every day, the walls closing in with memories I couldn't scrub away. Last night's broken glass still glittered in the kitchen corner where I hadn't dared to clean it yet. Ryan had thrown his bourbon tumbler when I'd asked him to lower his voice. The neighbors had started complaining. The request had been reasonable. His response had not been. I dabbed powder over my cheekbone where his ring had split the skin. The cut was small, but angry, refusing to be hidden completely no matter how much makeup I piled on. I'd tell Dante I'd walked into a cabinet door. It was becoming my signature excuse, varied occasionally with stairs or car doors, a rotation of plausible accidents for a woman who seemed increasingly clumsy. My phone buzzed on the sink's edge, and my entire body locked up, that Pavlovian response I'd developed over the past 6 months. But it wasn't Ryan. It was my alarm reminding me to leave in 15 minutes. I exhaled slowly, forcing my shoulders down from where they'd hunched up near my ears. The September morning was crisp as I stepped outside, the Chicago air carrying hints of the autumn to come. My heels clicked against the sidewalk in a rhythm I'd perfected, confident, purposeful, nothing like the shuffle I did around my own apartment when Ryan was home. I was good at this, the transformation. I'd had 3 years of practice being Dante's right hand, and I wasn't about to lose the one stable thing in my life because I'd made the catastrophic mistake of dating a man who wore his badge like permission to own me. The train ride downtown was packed with morning commuters, all of us pressed together in forced intimacy, everyone carefully avoiding eye contact. I kept my face angled toward the window, watching the city blur past, my reflection ghosting over the industrial landscape. Nobody looked at me too closely. Nobody ever did. In a city like Chicago, you learned early to mind your own business, especially if you valued your continued health. Dante's building rose 53 stories above Michigan Avenue, all glass and steel and the kind of money that didn't need to announce itself. The legitimate businesses operated on the lower 40 floors. Real estate development, import-export companies, consulting firms that actually consulted on things. The top 13 floors belonged to Dante's private empire, the machinery that ran the city's shadows. I'd been 24 when I'd answered his job posting, desperate and qualified enough to risk working for a man whose name made grown men cross themselves. 3 years later, I knew more about the inner workings of organized crime than any civilian should, and I'd kept every secret, managed every crisis, organized every clandestine meeting with the kind of discretion that had made me invaluable. The elevator rose smoothly, my stomach dropping as we climbed. I checked my reflection in the polished steel doors. The makeup held. My navy blazer covered the fingerprint bruises on my upper arms. My expression showed nothing but professional composure. I could do this. I always did. The 51st floor opened into elegant chaos. Phones ringing, assistants moving with purpose, the carefully choreographed dance of an organization that controlled everything from shipping contracts to political appointments. Dante's legitimate face to the world, run with corporate efficiency that would make any Fortune 500 jealous. "Morning, Elena," called Marco from his desk near the reception area. He was Dante's cousin, handled security logistics, and had a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Boss wants to see you the second you're in." My heart kicked against my ribs. Dante rarely summoned me immediately, unless something had gone wrong or was about to go very right. Both scenarios required my complete attention. "I'll head straight in." I walked through the outer offices toward the corner suite, passing windows that offered sweeping views of the Chicago skyline. Lake Michigan stretched blue and infinite to the east, indifferent to the thousand small dramas playing out in the buildings surrounding it. My hand went unconsciously to my collar, checking that it lay flat, hiding the shadow of a handprint on my throat from 2 nights ago. Dante's personal assistant's desk sat empty. I was Dante's personal assistant, but this desk belonged to the buffer, the person who screened before things reached me. Currently vacant after the last girl had quit, citing the stress. They always cited the stress, never the truth that working this close to a man like Dante Rinaldi meant living in a world where violence was always just one wrong word away. I knocked twice on the heavy oak door, the sound barely audible. Entra. His voice came through, that distinctive blend of American and Italian inflection that marked him as both fully Chicago and deeply connected to the old country. I pushed the door open and stepped into Dante's inner sanctum. The office was exactly what you'd expect from a man who commanded an empire. Expensive without being ostentatious, powerful without being obvious. Dark wood, leather furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than my annual salary on the walls. Floor-to-ceiling windows behind his desk framed him against the city he controlled. Dante Rinaldi sat reviewing documents, his dark hair perfectly styled in that slicked-back way that made him look like he'd walked out of a 1940s film about beautiful, dangerous men. He was 34, devastatingly handsome in the way that sharp angles and dark eyes could be devastating, dressed in a charcoal suit that had definitely been tailored on Savile Row. His fingers, I'd always noticed his hands, strong and elegant, capable of signing contracts or breaking bones with equal efficiency, drummed against the desktop in an irregular pattern that meant he was thinking through something complex. He didn't look up immediately, which gave me a moment to breathe, to settle my racing heart, to prepare whatever face I needed to wear for whatever crisis he was about to hand me. "The Castellano meeting has been moved to Thursday," I said, diving straight into business, keeping my voice level and professional. "The alderman confirmed for lunch tomorrow. The shipment from Elena." My name stopped me mid-sentence, the way he said it, quiet, careful, like he was defusing a bomb. "Look at me." Every muscle in my body tensed. This was the moment I'd been dreading, the inevitable collision between the life I hid and the life I lived here. I kept my face angled slightly away, letting my hair fall forward to shield the worst of the damage. "I asked you to look at me. Not a request." Dante Rinaldi didn't make requests. I lifted my chin and met his gaze, watching as his dark eyes traveled across my face with the same meticulous attention he gave to contracts that determined whether competitors lived or died. I saw the exact moment he registered the bruises. His expression didn't change, not exactly. But something behind his eyes went absolutely cold. The silence stretched between us, heavy and dangerous. Outside, the city continued its morning rush, oblivious to the way my entire world was tilting on its axis. Dante stood slowly, moving around the desk with the deliberate grace of a predator who'd just identified prey. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that probably had a name I couldn't pronounce. His hand came up and I flinched before I could stop myself, that reflexive fear response I'd developed, but he just waited until I stilled before his fingers, surprisingly gentle, tilted my face toward the light. "How long?" 2 words that weren't a question. It's not." My carefully constructed lies evaporated under his scrutiny. "I fell. On the stairs. It looks worse than it is." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Try again." "Dante, I'm fine. It was clumsy of me, but—" "Elena." He said my name like he was testing its weight, like he was deciding something. His thumb brushed carefully along my cheekbone, just below where the worst bruise darkened my skin. I have known you for 3 years. You don't fall. You don't stumble. You move through this office like you were born to navigate chaos, and suddenly you're showing up looking like someone used you as a punching bag. My breath caught. He was too close, seeing too much, his attention a spotlight I couldn't escape. "Tell me it was him," Dante said, his voice dropping to something quiet and absolutely lethal. "And I'll end it today." The promise hung in the air between us, and I knew with complete certainty that he meant it. Dante Rinaldi didn't make idle threats. If I gave him Ryan's name, Ryan would disappear into the kind of solution that involved shallow graves and concrete foundations. Part of me, the part that still flinched at loud noises and slept with a chair against the bedroom door, wanted exactly that. But the other part, the part that had somehow survived this long, knew that if Dante intervened, if he made Ryan disappear, I'd be implicated. I'd be the reason. I'd be trading one nightmare for another, owing a debt to a man who collected debts the way museums collected art. "I fell," I repeated, forcing steadiness into my voice. "The stairs in my building are poorly lit. It was stupid, but it was just an accident." Dante studied me for a long moment, and I could see him processing the lie, cataloging it, filing it away for future reference. He didn't believe me. I could tell by the way his fingers lingered on my jaw, by the cold calculation settling into his expression. But he was letting me keep my lie. For now. "If that changes," he said quietly, "if you decide you want to tell me the truth, I will handle it. Do you understand?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He released me slowly, stepping back to restore the professional distance that should exist between a mob boss and his assistant. But something had shifted in the room. Some invisible line had been crossed, and we both knew nothing would be quite the same. "The Castellano meeting," he said, returning to business as if the last 5 minutes hadn't happened. "Prepare the usual security protocols." I nodded again, grateful for the return to familiar territory, to the work that had always been my refuge. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "Elena." I looked back. "If he touches you again, I won't need your permission to end it." The door closed behind me, and I stood in the empty anteroom, my legs suddenly unsteady, my carefully maintained composure cracking at the edges. Dante knew. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the full horror show that was my relationship with Ryan, but enough. And worse, he cared. In whatever capacity a man like Dante Rinaldi could care about someone, he cared. And that terrified me more than anything Ryan had ever done. The rest of that morning passed in a blur of emails and phone calls, my fingers flying across the keyboard with the kind of practiced efficiency that came from 3 years of managing Dante's impossible schedule. But my mind kept circling back to those moments in his office, to the way his thumb had traced my bruised cheekbone with unexpected gentleness, to the promise, or threat, that hung in his words. I couldn't afford for Dante to get involved. Ryan was a decorated police officer with connections throughout the Chicago PD, friends in high places who looked the other way when he drank too much at cop bars and bragged about keeping his woman in line. If Dante moved against him, it wouldn't be subtle. It wouldn't be clean. And I'd be caught in the crossfire of a war between organized crime and law enforcement that nobody could win. My phone vibrated against the desk. A text from Ryan. "Finally awake. Where'd you run off to?" My stomach clenched. I'd left before he woke up, taking advantage of the vodka-induced unconsciousness that usually followed his explosive nights. I typed back quickly. "At work. We'll be late tonight. Big project." The response came immediately. "You're always fucking late. We need to talk when you get home." I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering. "We need to talk" was Ryan's code for an interrogation that would inevitably end with accusations, with his hands on me, with me apologizing for things I hadn't done just to make him stop. I deleted his messages. I always deleted his messages, as if erasing the evidence could erase the reality, and turned back to my computer. Elena. Marco appeared in my doorway, his expression unreadable. Boss wants you in the conference room. Now. I grabbed my tablet and followed him down the hall, my heels silent on the plush carpet. The conference room occupied the corner of the building. All glass walls that had been frosted for privacy. Inside, Dante stood with 3 men I recognized, his most trusted captains, the ones who handled the operations that required absolute discretion. They all looked up as I entered, and I felt their assessment like a physical touch. These were men who'd built their careers on reading people, on identifying weakness and exploiting it. I kept my spine straight, my expression neutral, channeling every ounce of professional composure I possessed. "Gentlemen," Dante said smoothly, "this is Elena Vitale, my personal assistant. Anything you say in front of me can be said in front of her. She's more familiar with my operations than most of you, and considerably more trustworthy." It was a compliment and a warning wrapped together. Trust her, but remember she answers only to me. The men nodded their acknowledgement, and we settled into the meeting that would consume the next 2 hours. Details about shipments, negotiations with rival families, strategic alliances that required careful orchestration. I took notes, flagged action items, reminded Dante of scheduling conflicts, all while hyper-aware of his attention tracking me at random intervals. He was watching. Not obviously. Not in a way the others would notice, but I felt it every time his gaze landed on me and lingered a second too long, cataloging details. The way I held my pen. The slight stiffness in my left shoulder where Ryan had grabbed me hard enough to leave marks. The careful way I tilted my head to keep my hair falling forward over the worst of the bruising. When the meeting finally ended and the men filed out, Dante gestured for me to stay. The door clicked shut behind the last captain, and we were alone in the glass room overlooking the city. "You're favoring your left side," he observed, pouring himself 2 fingers of whiskey from the sidebar. "Did you fall on that side too?" I met his gaze evenly. "I'm fine." "That's the 2nd time today you've told me you're fine." He took a slow sip of his drink. "I'm starting to recognize it as your tell." "My tell?" "The thing you say when you're lying." He set the glass down with precise care. "Everyone has one. Yours is I'm fine." Heat crept up my neck. 3 years of working for this man, and he'd been reading me the whole time, cataloging my patterns, learning my tells. It shouldn't have surprised me. Dante Rinaldi didn't become the most powerful man in Chicago by missing details. "You're right," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not fine. I'm tired. I'm stressed. I have a lot on my plate right now, and yes, I'm clumsy when I'm exhausted, but I'm handling it. Are you?" It wasn't a question. He moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back, not to show the fear that Ryan had trained into me. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like someone is handling you, and not in a way I approve of." "Dante, I had Marco pull your building security footage from last night." His voice remained conversational, almost casual, but I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. "Interesting viewing. You arrived home at 6:47. A man, I'm assuming the boyfriend you've kept very quiet about, arrived at 8:15, already drunk. He left this morning at 5:33. You left at 6:15, moving like someone who'd rather be anywhere else." My hands had gone cold. "You're having me watched?" "I'm protecting my investment." He said it matter-of-factly, without apology. "You know things that could destroy me, Elena. You think I don't keep tabs on the person who holds half my secrets?" Of course he did. I'd been naive to think otherwise, to imagine I had any privacy left. This was Dante's world, and I was just living in it, Another asset to be monitored and managed. "How long has he been hitting you?" Dante asked, and the gentleness in his voice was somehow worse than anger would have been. "He doesn't—" I stopped, catching myself in another lie. "It's complicated. It's very simple, actually." He was close enough now that I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could smell the whiskey on his breath. "He hurts you. I make him stop. That's the beginning, middle, and end of this story." "He's a cop," I said, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "He has friends, connections, people who would ask questions if he disappeared. You can't just make this go away, Dante. It would come back on you, on the organization. I'm not worth that risk." Something dangerous flashed across his face. "Let me be very clear about something, Elena. I decide what risks are worth taking. I decide who matters and who doesn't. And you?" His hand came up, fingers curling gently around the back of my neck in a gesture that was both possessive and protective. "You matter." I couldn't breathe. The room felt too small, the air too thin. This was a complication I absolutely could not afford. Dante Rinaldi was my boss, nothing more. He couldn't be anything more, because the second this became personal, the second I let myself rely on him, I'd be trading one cage for another. "I should get back to work," I whispered. "The Castellano contracts need review before tomorrow." He held my gaze for another heartbeat, then released me, stepping back to restore the professional distance. "Fine. But Elena?" I paused at the door. "This conversation isn't over. Not by a long shot." I spent the afternoon buried in contracts and correspondence, trying to lose myself in work the way I always had. But every time my phone buzzed with another message from Ryan, "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? You better not be ignoring me," my concentration shattered, reformed, shattered again. By 5 o'clock, my hands were shaking too badly to type. I stared at my computer screen, the words blurring together, Ryan's latest text glowing malevolently. "I'm coming to your office. We're having this out right now." Panic seized my chest. Ryan couldn't come here. He couldn't see Dante, couldn't make a scene, couldn't bring his jealous rage into this building where Dante's word was absolute law. I grabbed my phone, typing frantically. "No. Don't. I'll come home now. I promise. Just stay there." The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "You have 1 hour." I grabbed my bag and coat, my movements jerky with adrenaline, and practically ran for the elevator. I needed to get home before Ryan decided to make good on his threat. I needed to manage this situation before it exploded in a way I couldn't control. The elevator doors were closing when a hand shot between them, forcing them open. Dante stepped inside, his expression unreadable, and pressed the button for the parking garage. "I'll drive you," he said. "That's not necessary." It wasn't a question, Elena. The doors closed, sealing us in the small space. "Where does he think you're going?" "Home. He wants to talk." "Talk." Dante repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "Is that what we're calling it now?" I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The elevator descended in silence, my pulse thundering in my ears, the familiar dread settling into my bones. This was my life now, managing Ryan's moods, calculating his anger, trying to stay one step ahead of his fists. The parking garage was dim and cool, echoing with the sound of our footsteps. Dante led me to a black Mercedes that probably cost more than I'd earn in 5 years, and opened the passenger door. I slid in, the leather seats cold against my legs, and watched as he rounded the car with that predatory grace he wore like a second skin. "Address," he said, starting the engine. I gave it to him, that shabby building in Logan Square where rent was cheap and neighbors minded their own business. Dante said nothing as he navigated through downtown traffic, but I felt his attention like a physical presence, cataloging every nervous gesture, every shallow breath. We were 10 minutes from my building when my phone rang. Ryan, of course. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the decline button. "Answer it," Dante said quietly. "Put it on speaker." "Dante, no. Answer. It." My hand trembling, I accepted the call and tapped the speaker button. Ryan's voice filled the car, slurred and furious. "Where the fuck are you? You said an hour. It's been 45 minutes and you're not here." "I'm coming," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "Traffic is bad. I'll be there in 15 minutes. "You're lying. You're always fucking lying." Something crashed in the background, glass breaking, maybe furniture. "You know what? Don't bother. I'm coming to you. I'm gonna drag you out of that fancy office by your hair and show everyone what a lying bitch you really are." The call ended abruptly, and the silence that followed was deafening. I couldn't look at Dante. Couldn't face whatever expression would be on his face. This was my shame, my failure, laid bare for the one person whose respect I desperately needed to keep. "Change of plans," Dante said, his voice utterly calm. He made a sharp turn, heading away from my building. "You're coming home with me." "What? No, I can't." "You can and you will." He pulled out his own phone, pressing a contact with one hand while keeping the other steady on the wheel. "Marco, I need a team at Elena's building. Her boyfriend is on his way there, drunk and threatening violence. I want him detained if he shows up, photographed, documented, and escorted to a cell to sleep it off. And Marco?" His eyes met mine briefly. "If he resists, make sure the resisting is worth documenting." He ended the call before I could protest, before I could explain that this would only make things worse, that Ryan would know I'd gone to Dante, that the consequences would be catastrophic. "You're making this worse," I whispered. "He'll know I told you. He'll what?" Dante's voice cut through my panic. "Hit you harder? That ship has already sailed, Elena. What happens next is me making sure he never gets the chance to sail it again." We drove through the city as dusk settled, the lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. My phone buzzed, messages from Ryan, increasingly incoherent and threatening. Dante reached over and took it from my hand, silencing it and tucking it into his jacket pocket. "You don't need to read those," he said. "Not anymore." His penthouse was in a building I'd visited 1,000 times for meetings and deliveries, but I'd never been to his private residence on the top floor. The elevator required a special key, and when the doors opened directly into his living space, I found myself in surroundings that matched the man, elegant, expensive, with an undercurrent of danger in the art pieces that probably had violent histories, in the view that surveyed a city he controlled through fear and loyalty. "Guest room is down that hall," Dante said, shrugging off his jacket and loosening his tie. "Bathroom's stocked with everything you need. I'll have clothes brought up that actually fit you." I stood frozen in his foyer, clutching my bag like a shield. "I can't stay here." "You can't go home." He poured himself another whiskey and settled onto the leather sofa facing the windows. "Not tonight. Possibly not for several nights, depending on how your boyfriend handles his new reality." "What new reality?" "The one where he doesn't get to touch you anymore." Dante took a slow sip, his gaze steady on mine. "The one where he learns that there are consequences for putting his hands on something that belongs to me." "I don't belong to you," I said automatically, even though we both knew how hollow it sounded. A slight smile curved his lips. "No? Then tell me, Elena. Who else is going to protect you? Who else even knows? You've been hiding this for months, maybe longer, suffering in silence because you're afraid. Afraid of losing your job. Afraid of looking weak. Afraid that someone might actually give a damn what happens to you." His words cut too close to truth, exposing the raw fear I'd wrapped in lies and long sleeves. I had been alone in this, completely alone, because admitting what Ryan had become would mean admitting I'd made a catastrophic mistake in judgment. "Go get comfortable," Dante said, his voice gentling. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. Tonight you're safe. That's all that matters." I walked down the hall on unsteady legs, found the guest room, which was larger and more luxurious than my entire apartment, and finally let myself cry. Quiet tears that soaked into the expensive pillows, releasing months of terror and pain and desperate loneliness. Safe. Dante said I was safe here. But as I lay in the darkness listening to the city hum 40 stories below, I wondered if safety was even possible anymore, or if I'd just traded one dangerous man for another. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows I'd forgotten to close. For 3 disoriented seconds, I couldn't remember where I was. The bed too soft, the room too large, the silence too complete. Then reality crashed back. Dante's penthouse. Ryan's threats. The choice I hadn't made but had somehow been made for me. My phone sat on the nightstand, returned from wherever Dante had kept it overnight. I picked it up with dread coiling in my stomach, expecting dozens of increasingly unhinged messages from Ryan. Instead, there was just one, time-stamped at 2:37 in the morning. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. My place or yours." The relative calm in those words frightened me more than his rage would have. Ryan at his most dangerous wasn't when he was screaming. It was when he went quiet, when he calculated, when he planned his punishments with methodical precision. I showered in the guest bathroom, using products that smelled expensive and foreign, wrapping myself in a robe that hung on the back of the door. My own clothes from yesterday sat cleaned and pressed on a chair. When had that happened? But next to them was a completely new outfit in exactly my size. Black slacks, a silk blouse the color of deep emerald, even the right undergarments. The precision of it should have felt invasive, but instead it felt like being seen, being cared for in a way I'd forgotten existed. I dressed slowly, my body aching in places Ryan's hands had found 2 nights ago. The bruises on my face had darkened overnight, purple and yellow blooming across my cheekbone like poisonous flowers. No amount of makeup would cover this completely, but I tried anyway, using the cosmetics someone, Dante probably, had left on the counter. The smell of coffee drew me out of the guest room and into the main living space. Dante stood in his kitchen, dressed in casual black pants and a white shirt, with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. His hair was still damp from his own shower, falling slightly across his forehead instead of slicked back, making him look younger, almost approachable. "Coffee," he said, pushing a cup across the marble countertop toward me. "Made it strong. Figured you'd need it." I wrapped my hands around the cup, letting the heat seep into my palms. "Thank you. For last night. For this." I gestured vaguely at the clothes, the safety, the intervention I hadn't asked for but desperately needed. "Don't thank me yet." He leaned against the counter, his own coffee forgotten. "We need to talk about what happens next." I know what happens next. I go home. I talk to Ryan. I figure out how to end this without it destroying everything else in my life. The words came automatically. The script I'd been rehearsing for months. No, the single word cut through my rehearsed plan like a blade. What happens next is you stay here while I handle Ryan Collins. Permanently. My stomach dropped. Handle how? However necessary. His expression remained neutral, but I'd worked for him long enough to recognize the cold calculation behind it. I have people looking into his background right now. His financial situation, his connections, his extracurricular activities that might not look good on a police officer's record. By the end of today, I'll have enough leverage to bury him 6 ways to Sunday. Dante, you can't. I absolutely can. He set his cup down with deliberate care. And I will. The only question is whether you work with me or against me on this, Elena. I stared at him. This beautiful, dangerous man who'd decided to appoint himself my protector without asking if I wanted protecting. Why do you care? I'm your assistant. This isn't your problem. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the controlled facade. You stopped being just my assistant about 2 years ago, Elena. Probably longer, if I'm being honest. You think I don't notice how you take care of things before I even know they need handling? How you stay late making sure everything runs smoothly? How you've never once betrayed a confidence or used what you know for personal gain? He moved closer, and I found myself backed against the counter. You're loyal, brilliant, and completely wasted on that piece of shit who thinks he can own you. So yes, this is my problem, because you're mine to protect. I'm not yours, I said, but the protest sounded weak even to my own ears. Then whose are you? His hand came up, fingers tracing the line of my jaw with impossible gentleness. His? That drunk, violent cop who uses you as a punching bag? Because from where I'm standing, he's done a pretty shit job of taking care of what's his. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The space between us had charged with something dangerous and electric, crossing lines that should never be crossed between a boss and his employee. But we'd already crossed so many lines, him tracking my movements, learning my tells, inserting himself into my personal catastrophe, that one more hardly seemed to matter. Tell me about him, Dante said, stepping back to give me room to breathe. Tell me how it started. I wrapped my arms around myself, a protective gesture I'd developed. I met Ryan at a coffee shop 10 months ago. He was in uniform, charming, respectful. He asked me out and I said yes, because he seemed safe. Stable. A cop, for God's sake. How dangerous could a cop be? Very, Dante said quietly. Badge gives them immunity most criminals would kill for. The first few months were good, normal. He was attentive, interested in my life, protective in a way that felt caring. I laughed bitterly. I should have seen it earlier, the way that protectiveness turned into control. Questions about where I'd been, who I'd talked to, going through my phone when he thought I was asleep, getting angry if I mentioned male colleagues or took too long to respond to his texts. When did he first hit you? The memory rose like bile in my throat. 4 months ago. I'd worked late. There was a crisis with the Castellano deal, remember? You needed me to stay and coordinate with the lawyers. I forgot to text Ryan that I'd be late, and when I finally got home at midnight, he was drunk and furious. He accused me of cheating, of using work as an excuse to see other men. I tried to explain, but he grabbed my wrist, twisted it until I heard something pop. I touched my left wrist unconsciously, remembering the pain, the shock, the dawning horror of what he'd become. He cried afterward, said he was sorry, that it would never happen again. I believed him. But it did happen again. Not a question. 2 weeks later, then a week after that. Then it was every few days, sometimes for reasons I couldn't predict. Wrong dinner, wrong tone of voice, looking at him wrong. My voice cracked. I kept thinking if I could just figure out the pattern, if I could just be better, he'd stop. But there is no pattern, is there? There's just his anger and my body and the fact that nobody knows because I'm too ashamed to tell them. Dante was silent for a long moment, his jaw working. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and absolutely lethal. I'm going to destroy him, Elena. Not just ruin him. Destroy him. And you're going to let me. Because he doesn't deserve mercy, and you deserve justice. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it to face me. Security footage from my building's entrance, time-stamped from last night. Ryan stumbling up to the door at 9:43, pounding on it, screaming my name loud enough that the timestamp barely captured the audio. Then Dante's men appearing, calmly restraining him, Ryan throwing wild punches that didn't connect, finally being subdued and escorted to a waiting vehicle. He spent last night in a private holding facility, Dante said. Sobering up, being documented, having every threat and slur he screamed recorded for posterity. My lawyers are already drafting a restraining order that will have teeth, the kind that even a cop can't ignore. And that's just the beginning. I watched the footage loop, watched Ryan's rage and impotence, and felt something inside me shift. For 10 months, I'd been managing his violence alone, absorbing his anger, making myself smaller and quieter in the hopes of surviving. But Dante was offering something different. Not just protection, but retribution. What do you want from me in return? I asked, because men like Dante Rinaldi didn't give without expecting payment. I want you to stop hiding. He took the phone back, his dark eyes intense on mine. I want you to trust me enough to let me handle this. And I want you to stay here, in my home, where I can make sure you're safe while I dismantle that piece of shit's entire existence. I can't just move in with you. What would people think? Your organization, they'd think you're under my protection, which you are. They'd think crossing you means crossing me, which it does. And they'd be absolutely right. He moved closer again, that predatory grace making my pulse race. Unless you're worried about something else, about what being under my protection might mean. Heat flooded my face. I work for you, Dante. We can't what? His hand slid into my hair, tilting my face up to his. Can't acknowledge that something's been building between us for 2 years? That every time you walk into my office, I have to remind myself you're off limits? That seeing you hurt makes me want to burn down the world? You're my boss, I whispered, even as my body betrayed me, swaying toward him. I'm a lot of things, Elena. Your boss, your protector, a man who's wanted you for longer than he's willing to admit. His thumb traced my lower lip. The question is, what are you? Confused, scared, in way over my head. But I didn't pull away, couldn't pull away, because Dante was offering me something Ryan had stolen, the choice to be wanted rather than owned, to be protected rather than controlled, to matter to someone who had the power to actually keep me safe. His lips brushed mine, tentative, asking permission. I closed the distance, kissing him back with all the desperation and need I'd kept locked away for months. It wasn't gentle, couldn't be gentle with everything raw and bleeding between us. But it was honest. He kissed me like I mattered, like I was worth protecting, like I was more than the sum of my bruises. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Stay, he said simply. Let me fix this. Let me fix you. I'm not broken, I said automatically. No. His hands framed my face, careful of the bruises. You're bent, bruised, hurt, but not broken, and I'm going to make sure you never are. My phone buzzed on the counter. Ryan, probably, wondering why I hadn't responded to his message. Dante picked it up, read the screen, and his expression went cold. He's asking if you're coming home today. Wants to talk things through. Dante's voice dripped with contempt. What do you want me to tell him? I thought about it. About going back to that apartment. About sitting across from Ryan while he fed me apologies and promises. About the inevitable moment when his hands would find me again. About the cycle I'd been trapped in. The fear that had become my constant companion. The slow erosion of everything I'd once been. Tell him I'm not coming home, I said. the words feeling like liberation and terror combined. "Tell him it's over. Tell him." I stopped, gathering courage. "Tell him I'm exactly where I belong." Dante smiled, fierce and proud, and typed out a message I couldn't see. When he hit send, he powered the phone down completely and set it aside. "He'll escalate," I warned. "He won't just let this go." "I know." Dante pulled me against his chest, his arms solid and safe around me. "But he's going to learn something very important about threatening what's mine. It comes with consequences he can't imagine and won't survive." I leaned into him, letting myself, just for a moment, believe in the safety he promised. Outside, the city woke fully to the morning. 9 million people going about their lives, unaware that mine had just fundamentally shifted. I'd walked into Dante's penthouse as a woman fleeing violence. I might walk out of it as something else entirely, someone protected, claimed, valued, or I might not walk out at all. Might stay exactly here, in the eye of this particular storm, and let Dante Rinaldi reshape my world in his image. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. The next 3 days existed in a strange suspension of reality. I lived in Dante's penthouse, worked from his home office, which he'd immediately equipped with everything I needed to manage his empire remotely, and tried not to think about the implications of sleeping under the same roof as a man who declared me his to protect. Dante worked with surgical precision, dismantling Ryan's life piece by careful piece. I watched from the periphery, horrified and fascinated by the efficiency of it. Financial records appeared documenting gambling debts Ryan had hidden from everyone. Internal Affairs received anonymous tips about evidence tampering on old cases. His patrol partner suddenly remembered incidents of excessive force that had been swept under the rug. The carefully constructed image of Ryan Collins, decorated officer, began to crack and crumble. "You're destroying his career," I said on the third morning, watching Dante review another file his people had compiled. "I'm exposing what was already there." He didn't look up from the documents. "He did this to himself, Elena. I'm just making sure the right people finally see it." My phone, a new one Dante had provided after permanently disabling my old number, remained mercifully silent. Ryan couldn't reach me anymore, couldn't text his threats or call with his apologies. The silence should have brought relief. Instead, it amplified my anxiety, made me jumpy at unexpected sounds, hyper-aware of every footstep in the hallway outside Dante's door. "You're safe here," Dante reminded me constantly, reading my tension with unnerving accuracy. "He doesn't know where you are. Can't find you. Even if he did, he'd have to go through security that would stop him before he reached the elevator." But safety was a concept I'd forgotten how to believe in. I'd spent too many months looking over my shoulder, calculating escape routes, bracing for impact. My body remained locked in survival mode, even as my mind tried to accept the new reality. On the fourth morning, I woke to find Dante already dressed for the office, standing at the foot of my bed with coffee and an expression I couldn't quite read. "We need to talk," he said, and my stomach immediately clenched with familiar dread before I remembered. Dante wasn't Ryan. When Dante said we needed to talk, it didn't mean I was in danger. I sat up, pulling the covers around me protectively. "What happened?" "Ryan showed up at the office yesterday. Marco and the security team detained him before he could cause a scene, but he was asking for you, demanding to see you." Dante set the coffee on the nightstand. "He knows you're with me, Elena, or at least suspects it." Fear spiked cold through my veins. "What did you do?" Had a conversation with him, made some things very clear about boundaries and consequences. Dante's expression remained neutral, but I caught the edge of violence beneath it. "He won't be bothering you at the office again. I've made sure of it." "How?" I needed to know. needed to understand what price was being paid for my protection. Do you really want those details? He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel his warmth. Or do you just want to trust that I handled it? I studied his face. The sharp lines, the dark eyes that held secrets I'd probably never fully know. The mouth that had kissed me with devastating gentleness 3 days ago and hadn't touched me since. Dante Rinaldi was a dangerous man who controlled his empire through calculated violence and strategic intimidation, but he'd also held me while I cried, provided safety without demanding anything in return, and was systematically destroying the man who'd hurt me. I trust you, I said, and meant it. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or satisfaction. Good, because what happens next requires that trust. He pulled out a manila folder, handed it to me. This is everything my lawyers have compiled. Restraining order that's already been filed and approved. Documentation of Ryan's financial improprieties. Internal affairs investigation that's been fast-tracked and... He paused, watching my face carefully. Criminal charges for assault and domestic violence, contingent on your cooperation. I opened the folder with shaking hands, scanning documents that represented my entire nightmare laid out in legal terminology. Photographs of my injuries taken by a forensic specialist while I'd slept. When had that happened? Medical records I didn't remember authorizing. Witness statements from neighbors I'd barely spoken to who'd apparently heard more than I'd realized. I can't testify against him, I whispered. I can't stand up in court and... You won't have to. Dante's hand covered mine, stilling my trembling fingers. I've made him an offer he's going to accept. He resigns from the force, accepts a dishonorable discharge that will tank any future career in law enforcement, leaves the state within 30 days, and never contacts you again. In exchange, the criminal charges get filed away as long as he complies. He violates any part of that agreement. Every piece of evidence gets submitted and he goes to prison. It was too much. Too fast. Everything I'd been terrified to hope for, handed to me in a neat legal package. Why would he agree to that? Because the alternative is worse. Dante's voice went cold. Much worse, and I made sure he understood exactly how much worse it could be. I closed the folder, my mind reeling. So that's it? He just disappears and I'm free? Free. Dante repeated the word like he was testing it. Is that what you want, Elena? Complete freedom? Because I can arrange that too. New identity, relocation, enough money to start over somewhere far from here. You'd never have to see Ryan or me again. The offer hung between us, genuine and terrifying. Dante was giving me a choice. Real freedom versus whatever this was that had been building between us for 4 days of living in close quarters, of shared coffee and late-night conversations, of his fierce protectiveness and my growing dependence on it. Is that what you want? I asked, turning the question back on him. For me to disappear? No. The single word came swift and certain. But what I want doesn't matter if it's not what you want. I studied him, this complicated, dangerous man who'd inserted himself into my life and refused to let me drown alone. What do you want, Dante? I want you to stay. He said it simply, without the pretty words or promises men usually offered. Here, with me. Not just as my assistant, though you're damn good at that, but as... He paused, searching for words. As whatever you're willing to be. I can give you protection, resources, a life where you never have to fear anyone putting their hands on you again. But I can't promise you easy, Elena. My world isn't easy. It's dangerous and complicated, and there are always enemies at the gate. But you'd be safe. With me, you'd always be safe. It wasn't a declaration of love. Dante Rinaldi probably didn't do declarations of love. But it was honest, and it was offered without conditions beyond my willingness to accept it. I want to stay, I heard myself say. the words coming from some deep place I'd kept locked away. But I need to know. Is this about possession for you? About owning me the way Ryan wanted to own me? Dante's expression hardened. I am nothing like that piece of shit. Nothing. When I say you're mine to protect, I mean protect, not control. You want to work? Work. Want your own space? I'll buy you a place. Want to leave? The door's not locked. The difference between me and him is that I don't need to break you to keep you. I'd rather you stay because you choose to, not because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. And if I choose wrong? The question escaped before I could stop it. If I stay, and this becomes another nightmare I can't escape? He leaned forward, his hands framing my face with that careful gentleness that undid me every time. Then you leave, and I let you, no matter how much it costs me. That's the promise, Elena. You'll always have a choice with me. Always. I believed him. Maybe I was a fool for believing him, for trusting a man whose business was built on violence and intimidation. But in 4 days, Dante had shown me more respect and genuine care than Ryan had in 10 months. He'd seen me at my absolute worst, bruised, terrified, broken down, and instead of exploiting that vulnerability, he'd protected it. Okay, I whispered. I'll stay. His smile was fierce and triumphant, and then he was kissing me again, deeper this time, more certain. His hands slid into my hair, careful of the fading bruises, and I kissed him back with all the desperation and hope tangled together in my chest. This was dangerous, falling for a man like Dante Rinaldi. But staying with Ryan would have killed me, and being alone terrified me almost as much. At least with Dante, I'd chosen the danger. At least with him, I knew what I was getting into. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine. I need to go to the office today. Important meeting I can't reschedule. Come with me. I haven't been back since... I stopped, swallowing hard. Since the morning I'd walked in with Bruises, Ryan had left, and Dante had seen through all my lies. I know, but you can't hide forever, and people need to see that you're under my protection now. Send a message to anyone who might think about using you to get to me. His thumb traced my cheekbone. Plus, I work better when you're there. You organize the chaos in ways nobody else can. The normalcy of it, returning to work, to the routine that had been my refuge, called to something in me. I'd spent 4 days in this penthouse sanctuary, but I couldn't hide here forever. Eventually, I'd have to face the world again, and doing it with Dante beside me felt safer than doing it alone. Okay, I agreed. I'll come with you. Walking into Dante's office building felt like returning to a crime scene. Everything looked the same. The marble lobby, the elevator bank, the familiar faces of security personnel. But I felt fundamentally changed. The last time I'd been here, I'd been a woman hiding bruises and terror beneath professional composure. Now I was. What exactly? Dante's assistant still, yes, but also his... what? Girlfriend seemed too simple. Protected asset too cold. Something in between. Something undefined and dangerous. The elevator ride to the 51st floor felt longer than usual. Dante's presence beside me both comforting and charged with electricity. He'd dressed me that morning in clothes from the new wardrobe that had appeared in the guest room. Tailored black slacks and a silk blouse in deep burgundy that somehow made me look powerful instead of vulnerable. The bruises on my face had faded enough that makeup covered most of them, though I caught myself touching my cheekbone occasionally, checking that the concealer held. Stop, Dante said quietly, taking my hand and lacing his fingers through mine. You're perfect. Let anyone try to say otherwise. The doors opened to the controlled chaos of the executive floor, and I felt every eye turn toward us. Not obviously, these were people trained in discretion, but I felt their attention like physical touch. Dante Rinaldi arriving with his assistant, holding her hand, sending a message clearer than any announcement. She's with me now. Marco looked up from his desk near reception, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes sharp with calculation. Boss, Elena. He nodded to each of us. The Castellano people are already in conference room 2. They arrived early. Let them wait. Dante's tone brokered no argument. Elena needs to get settled in her office first. Make sure nobody bothers her unless it's an emergency. My office, the small space adjacent to Dante's private suite where I'd spent 3 years managing his impossible schedule, looked exactly as I'd left it. The coffee cup I'd abandoned that last morning still sat on my desk, the lipstick stain on the rim a ghost of who I'd been. I set my bag down carefully, overwhelmed by the familiar surroundings, by the normalcy of returning to work. You okay? Dante appeared in the doorway, watching me with that unsettling attention that missed nothing. I don't know, I admitted. It feels strange being back. Like I should be different somehow, but everything here is exactly the same. You are different. He moved into the office, closing the door behind him. But that's not a bad thing, Elena. Different doesn't mean broken. A knock interrupted whatever I might have said. Marco's voice came through the door. Boss, the Castellanos are getting restless. Dante sighed, pressing a quick kiss to my forehead. Work. Always work. He turned back at the doorway. Join me in 30 minutes? I want you in this meeting. I nodded, already pulling up my computer to review what I'd missed in 4 days of absence. Email had piled up, dozens of messages requiring responses, scheduling conflicts that needed resolution, the endless administrative machinery that kept Dante's empire running smoothly. I fell into the rhythm of it gratefully, letting work provide structure to the chaos of my personal life. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. Dante was right. I did make his work easier, anticipating needs before he voiced them, managing the complex dance of appointments and negotiations that defined his days. And having me there seemed to calm something in him, made him more focused, more effective. We'd always worked well together, but now there was an additional current running beneath our professional interactions, charged glances and careful touches that nobody else could see but we both felt. At lunch, Dante had food brought to his office, not the usual takeout, but something from an expensive restaurant I couldn't pronounce. He cleared space on his desk and we ate together, a strange domestic ritual in the middle of his criminal empire. Ryan signed the agreement this morning, he said casually, like he was discussing the weather. His lawyers reviewed everything. He signed, and he has 28 days to be out of Illinois. The restraining order is in effect immediately. The news should have brought relief. Instead, I felt strangely hollow. That's it? He just leaves and everything's over? That's how it works when you have the right leverage. Dante set down his fork, studying my face. You're not happy. I thought this is what you wanted. I do. It is. I struggled to articulate the complicated tangle of emotions. It's just, it feels too easy. Like there should be more consequences for what he did. Like he should suffer the way he made me suffer. Something dark flickered across Dante's face. Who says he won't? What do you mean? I mean that leaving the state and losing his career are just the public consequences, Elena. There are other debts he's accumulated that will follow him wherever he goes. People he's crossed. Favors he owes. And I've made sure every one of those people knows exactly where to find him. His voice remained conversational, but I heard the edge of violence beneath it. Ryan Collins is going to spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, wondering when his past will catch up. That's suffering too. I should have been horrified, should have protested that level of vindictiveness. But after months of absorbing Ryan's rage, of living in constant fear, the thought of him experiencing even a fraction of that terror felt like justice. Thank you, I said quietly. For all of it. for believing me, for protecting me, for... I gestured vaguely, encompassing everything that had changed in 1 week. You don't need to thank me for doing what should have been done from the beginning. He reached across the desk, taking my hand. You deserved better than him, Elena. You've always deserved better. The afternoon brought a crisis that required all my attention. A shipment delayed, negotiations threatened, tempers flaring on all sides. I handled it the way I always had, making calls, smoothing ruffled feathers, finding solutions that satisfied everyone involved. This was what I was good at. This organizational wizardry that made Dante's complex operation run smoothly. By 6 o'clock, the crisis was resolved and I was exhausted. Dante found me at my desk, staring at my computer screen without really seeing it. Come on, he said, pulling me gently to my feet. We're done for today. There's still the Morrison contract to review and it'll keep until tomorrow. His hand settled on my shoulders, thumbs kneading the tension gathered there. You've done enough. More than enough. The drive back to his penthouse felt different than it had that morning. More settled, maybe, like we were returning home rather than retreating to a sanctuary. Dante ordered dinner from my favorite Italian place. How did he know? And we ate on the balcony overlooking the city, watching lights bloom against the gathering darkness. I could get used to this, I admitted, the wine making me brave enough to voice what I'd been thinking all day. Good. Dante's smile was genuine, without the careful calculation he wore for everyone else. Because I plan on keeping you for a very long time. What does that mean exactly? I needed to understand the shape of this relationship, the boundaries and expectations. Am I still your assistant? Are we together? Is this temporary until things settle, or... Elena. He stopped my anxious rambling with a kiss, soft and thorough. You're whatever you want to be. My assistant, yes, because you're too good at it for me to let that go. But also mine in every way that matters. My partner. My woman. The person I trust most in this world. His hand cupped my cheek. Is that answer enough? It should have felt too fast, too intense. A week ago, I'd been trapped in a nightmare with Ryan. Now I was sitting on a penthouse balcony with a mob boss who'd declared me his in front of his entire organization. Nothing about this was rational or safe or smart. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Like I wasn't constantly calculating danger, measuring the distance to exits, bracing for impact. Dante had meant what he said. With him, I had choices. He'd given me power rather than taking it away, protected rather than controlled. It's enough, I said, leaning into his touch. More than enough. That night, I didn't sleep in the guest room. I fell asleep in Dante's bed, wrapped in his arms, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath my ear. And for the first time in months, I slept without nightmares, without fear, knowing that if any danger came for me, it would have to go through the most dangerous man in Chicago first. 3 weeks later, I stood in Dante's office reviewing security protocols for an upcoming summit, with families from New York and Boston. The bruises had faded completely, leaving no physical trace of Ryan's violence. But the internal scars remained, hypervigilance that made me jump at unexpected sounds, anxiety that spiked when my new phone rang, the occasional nightmare that had me waking in Dante's arms, trembling and disoriented. You're doing it again, Dante said from his position at the window, not turning around but somehow aware of my nervous energy. Doing what? Touching your wrist. He turned then, his dark eyes knowing. The one he twisted. You do it when you're stressed. I hadn't even realized my fingers had gone automatically to that remembered pain. Old habit. We could break it. He crossed to me, taking my hand and pressing a kiss to the inside of my wrist, over the faint scar that remained. Replace the bad memory with good ones. Heat flooded my face even after 3 weeks of this. His casual intimacy, the way he touched me like I was something precious, the gradual replacement of fear with something warm and safe. We'd been careful, taking things slowly despite the intensity of how this had started. Dante seemed content to let me set the pace, never pushing, always offering comfort without demanding anything in return. "The New York people arrive at 3, I said, redirecting to safer territory. "Marco has the warehouse secured, and I've arranged for the usual security sweeps. Always working." His hand settled on my waist, pulling me against him. "What would I do without you?" "Probably descend into total chaos within a week." "Probably." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "Good thing I'm never letting you go." A knock at the door interrupted whatever I might have said. Marco entered, his expression grim. "Boss, we have a situation. Ryan Collins is in the lobby demanding to see Elena." Ice flooded my veins. "What? He can't be here. The restraining order is apparently not enough to keep him away." Dante's expression went cold, dangerous. "How did he get past building security?" "Showed his badge, claimed police business." Marco's jaw tightened. "Our guys are keeping him contained in the lobby, but he's making a scene. Says he won't leave until Elena comes down." "Absolutely not." Dante's voice brooked no argument. "Elena stays here. I'll handle this." "No." The word surprised me as much as it surprised them. "I should be there. He came for me. I should face him." "Elena." "Not alone," I interrupted. "But I can't hide from him forever, Dante. And maybe if he sees me, sees that I'm really done, he'll finally accept it and leave." Dante studied me for a long moment, calculation warring with protectiveness. "Fine, but I'm coming with you, and Marco brings a full security team. He even looks at you wrong, and this ends badly for him." The elevator ride down felt endless, my pulse hammering against my ribs, old fear rising like bile. But Dante's hand at the small of my back steadied me, reminded me that I wasn't alone anymore. Wasn't the same woman who'd absorbed Ryan's rage in terrified silence. The lobby had been cleared of civilians, just Marco's security team forming a loose perimeter around Ryan, who stood in the center looking somehow smaller than I remembered. The alcohol had taken its toll. His face was bloated, his uniform rumpled, his eyes bloodshot and wild. This was the man who'd terrorized me for months, and looking at him now I felt nothing. No fear, no lingering affection. Just a vast emptiness where those emotions used to live. "Elena." He said my name like a prayer or a curse, taking a step toward me before Marco's team shifted, blocking his path. "Finally. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. You changed your number. Your apartment's empty. I had to come here because you left me no choice." "You had a choice," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "You chose to hit me. Repeatedly. For months. That killed whatever we had, Ryan." I was stressed. The job, the pressure. You know how it is. But I've been sober 3 weeks now. Clean. I'm seeing a therapist. I can change, Elena. I can be better. Just give me another chance. It was the speech I'd wanted to hear months ago. The promises that would have made me stay, despite every warning sign. Now they rang hollow, too little and far too late. "No," I said simply. "I'm done. We're done. You signed the agreement, Ryan. You have 3 days left to be out of Illinois. Stick to that, and we never have to see each other again." His expression twisted, rage breaking through the veneer of contrition. "You're with him, aren't you? That criminal. That mob boss." He spat the words like venom. "You left me for him. Traded up for a man with more money and power." "I left you because you made me afraid to exist in my own home," I corrected. "Because I spent every day calculating how to survive you. Dante had nothing to do with that decision. He just gave me the safety to make it. Safety? Ryan's laugh was bitter. You think you're safe with him? He's a murderer, Elena. A thug in an expensive suit. How long before he turns on you the way I did? How long before you're just another body they find in the river? Dante moved then, stepping between us with lethal grace. Careful, Officer Collins. You're making threats in front of witnesses, violating a restraining order, and generally acting like a man with a death wish. Is that a threat? Ryan's hand moved toward his service weapon, and immediately Marco's entire team had guns drawn, red laser sights dotting Ryan's chest. It's a fact. Dante's voice remained conversational, almost pleasant. You're in my building, harassing my woman, carrying a weapon you're not authorized to draw. The only reason you're still breathing is because Elena asked me to let you walk away. But that consideration only extends so far. Ryan's gaze moved between the weapons trained on him, the cold calculation in Dante's expression, the complete lack of fear in my face. Whatever he'd hoped to accomplish by coming here, he'd failed spectacularly. You'll regret this, he said, directing it at me. Both of you. I have friends, connections. I can make your life hell. You had friends, Dante corrected. Past tense. Funny thing about connections. They evaporate when you become a liability. Your former colleagues want nothing to do with you now. The internal affairs investigation found some very interesting discrepancies in your record. And the Bratva, you remember them, don't you? The Russian organization you tried to play against my family. They're very interested in having a conversation with you about loyalty. Ryan's face went ashen. You set me up. I exposed what was already there. Dante's smile was cold. Every bad decision, every corner you cut, every dirty dollar you took. All I did was make sure the right people knew where to look. The consequences? Those are all yours, Officer Collins. 2 uniformed police officers entered the lobby. Real cops, not Ryan's bought friends. Marco must have called them while we were upstairs. Ryan Collins? One of them asked, though it was clearly pro forma. We need you to come with us. There are some questions about your recent conduct that require official answers. Ryan's expression cycled through rage, fear, and resignation. He looked at me one last time, and I saw the exact moment he accepted defeat. I loved you, he said quietly. That has to count for something. It doesn't, I replied, my voice firm. Love doesn't hit. Love doesn't terrorize. Whatever you felt for me, it wasn't love, and I'm done letting you pretend otherwise. The officers escorted him out, his protest fading as the lobby doors closed behind them. Silence settled over the space, broken only by Marco quietly directing his team to stand down. I realized I was shaking, adrenaline draining away and leaving me hollow. Dante's arms came around me immediately, pulling me against his chest. You did good, he murmured into my hair. So good, Elena. You stood your ground, didn't let him manipulate you. I'm proud of you. The words broke something inside me and I cried. Not from fear or pain, but from relief. It was over. Really. Finally over. Ryan was gone, facing consequences for his actions, and I was still standing, stronger than I'd been, braver than I'd thought possible. Take her upstairs, Dante instructed Marco quietly. Cancel my afternoon meetings. I'll join you in a minute. Marco nodded, offering me his arm with unexpected gentleness. Come on, Elena. Let's get you somewhere comfortable. I let him guide me to the elevator, too emotionally exhausted to protest. Behind us, I heard Dante making calls, his voice low and dangerous as he spoke in rapid Italian, ensuring, I suspected, that Ryan's departure from Illinois would be expedited, that every remaining connection he had would be severed, that his new life, wherever he ended up, would be exactly as miserable as he deserved. Upstairs, I collapsed onto the sofa in Dante's office, accepting the water Marco pressed into my hands. My phone, My new clean phone with its carefully curated contacts sat silent on the desk. No more threatening texts. No more drunken calls. No more walking on eggshells waiting for the next explosion. Dante appeared 20 minutes later, his expression softer than it had been in the lobby. He dismissed Marco with a nod and knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. "How are you feeling?" "Free," I said, the word emerging with surprised wonder. "For the first time in months, I actually feel free. You are." He pressed a kiss to my knuckles. "He's gone, Elena. Not just geographically. I've made sure he has enough problems following him that he won't have time to think about you. And if he does..." The unspoken threat hung in the air. "Thank you." I squeezed his hands. For everything. For seeing me when I was invisible. For caring when I thought nobody did. For giving me the strength to face him today. "You had that strength all along." He stood, pulling me up with him and into his arms. "I just gave you the space to find it." We stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other while the city hummed 40 stories below. My old life, the fear, the violence, the desperate survival mode, felt like someone else's story now. This was my reality. Dante's arms, his fierce protection, his quiet certainty that I deserved better. "What happens now?" I asked eventually. "Now?" He pulled back enough to see my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone where bruises used to bloom. "Now you keep working beside me, making my chaos manageable. You keep living here because you choose to, not because you're afraid. And I keep making sure that nobody ever puts their hands on you again. That's the deal, Elena. Protection, partnership, and as much love as a man like me is capable of giving." "Is that enough?" I asked. Testing. "For you?" "More than enough." His kiss was soft, reverent. "You're more than enough. More than I deserve, probably. But I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway." I smiled against his mouth. "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. Never, never." It was a promise and a choice and a future I was claiming for myself. The bruises had faded, but their lesson remained. I would never again let anyone make me small, make me scared, make me less than I was. And with Dante beside me, I wouldn't have to. The intercom buzzed. Marco, apologetic about interrupting, but the New York delegation had arrived early. Dante sighed, pressing one more kiss to my forehead before reluctantly releasing me. "Work calls," he said. "Always does." I straightened my blouse, checked my appearance in the window's reflection, and found someone I barely recognized looking back, confident, composed, unbroken. "Let's go show them how it's done." We walked into that meeting side by side, partners in every sense of the word. And if the New York people noticed how Dante's hand lingered at the small of my back, how his attention tracked me even while negotiating complex deals, how I moved through his organization with the quiet authority of someone under his complete protection, well, that was exactly the message we wanted to send. I was Elena Vitale, Dante Rinaldi's right hand and chosen woman. The bruises I'd tried to hide had become the catalyst for claiming my power, and nobody, not Ryan, not anyone, would ever make me hide again.